The courtroom smelled of old wood and quiet tension. Every bench was filled, yet the air felt heavy, as if everyone was holding their breath. I sat in the back row, hands folded tightly in my lap, listening to my father argue with the judge. His voice was confident, almost smug, because he believed he had already won. Across the aisle, my mother sat alone, her shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't have a lawyer beside her. At least that's what everyone thought. My father's attorney adjusted his tie and spoke smoothly, laying out their case as if the outcome were obvious. He painted my mother as irresponsible, unprepared, and unworthy. Each word landed like a slap. I watched my father nod along, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He leaned back in his chair, convinced the courtroom was on his side. I felt my pulse race. He had no idea. Weeks earlier, when my mother had called me late at night, her voice shaking, I'd made a decision that would change everything. I was studying law in another city, still finishing my final year. I wasn't a licensed attorney yet, but I knew the case inside and out. I knew the documents he was hiding, the financial records he assumed no one would find, and the lies he had grown comfortable telling. The judge cleared his throat. "Does the respondent have legal representation?" he asked, glancing toward my mother. My father turned slightly, expecting silence. Instead, I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor echoed through the room. Heads turned. My father's smile froze. For a moment, he didn't recognize me. Not in this setting, not standing tall in a courtroom. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "She does," the courtroom murmured. The judge raised an eyebrow. My father's attorney frowned, confused. My father slowly turned fully toward me, his face draining of color. "You?" he whispered, barely audible. I met his gaze without flinching. "I'll be representing my mother today with the court's permission." The judge studied me for a long second, then nodded. "Proceed." My father swallowed hard. The confidence he'd walked in with cracked just slightly, but enough for me to see it. He'd assumed we were unprepared, unprotected, and powerless. He was wrong, and as I stepped forward, opening the folder in my hands, I knew this was only the beginning. The courtroom grew silent as I approached the podium. I could feel my father's eyes burning into my back, a mix of disbelief and anger. He straightened in his seat. Trying to regain the authority he suddenly felt slipping away. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering urgently, but my father waved him off. He still believed this was a bluff. I began calmly introducing myself and clarifying my status to the court. I explained that while I was completing my final legal requirements, I had been granted permission to speak under supervision and submit prepared arguments. The judge listened carefully, then nodded for me to continue. "Your Honor," I said, "the narrative presented so far is incomplete." I turned slightly, just enough to face my father. For a brief second, our eyes met. The man who once towered over me, whose voice could silence an entire room, now looked uncertain. I laid out the first document. Bank statements showing regular transfers from joint accounts into private ones, created shortly before the separation. My father's lawyer objected immediately, but the judge overruled him after reviewing the evidence. "These funds," I continued, "were moved without my mother's consent and used to purchase assets hidden from this court." A murmur spread through the benches. My father shifted in his chair, jaw tightening. Next came the employment records, proof that my mother had been the primary caregiver for years, sacrificing her own career to support the family. The claim that she was financially irresponsible began to unravel. My father's lawyer stood again, voice sharper now. "Objection, speculation." I didn't raise my voice. "These are sworn statements and verified records, Your Honor." The judge leaned forward. "Overruled. Continue." I could feel the balance tipping. Each page, I turned, stripped away another layer of the story my father had so confidently built. He stopped looking at me altogether, staring instead at the table in front of him. Then I presented the final piece, an email thread. One message sent late at night spelled out his intent to delay proceedings until my mother ran out of resources. The courtroom fell completely still as the judge read it. My father's lawyer closed his folder slowly. For the first time, my father looked afraid. I finished by addressing the court directly. "This case is not about winning or losing. It's about fairness, and fairness begins with the truth." The judge thanked me and called for a brief recess. As everyone stood, My father remained seated, staring ahead, his face pale and rigid. The man who walked in certain of victory was gone, and during that quiet break, I realized something powerful. Standing up for someone you love doesn't require permission, only courage. When the judge returned, the real consequences were about to begin.